Alright, we're coming to you from the tee today because it's nice outside. Although it was not nice outside this morning. We got 1.25 inches of rain, and it's supposed to be more coming tonight. So needless to say, there's water standing everywhere, which kind of put the binders on any sort of productive work. So I got the grain drill calibrated yesterday, did a little bit of work around the house, got some things fixed that or some small stuff fixed, got the oil change in the Super 55. So as of right now, everything except for the planter, and the only reason I say that is because we still need to get the monitor communicating with the GPS, or make sure the monitor is communicating with the GPS, but I digress. So everything is ready to go. Now we're just waiting on weather. So anyhow, with that being said, didn't really get anything to video this weekend, so we're gonna get another couple Oliver employee videos in. I got like 4 or 5 more to go. Anyway, this one is our first Dean for the trip. Dean spent a lot of time in the Foundry as a mold maker, and he also spent some time in parts procurement on the assembly line and some clerical stuff like that. So he had quite the swing of job transitions while at his time at the plant, and he was there for a pretty long time. This one's kind of long. He for the last few, he freely admitted that for the last few years, and he's not the only one I talked to out there that has been having this problem, but he freely admitted that for the past few years his memory's been failing him. And we got to him just in time, because 2 weeks to the day prior to me being out there and talking to him, I'm not going to say exactly what, because it's not my place to give any medical information out, but he did receive a diagnosis that kind of explains his memory issues he's been having. And let's just say we got to him in time. He's still mostly there, but you'll see in the video, there are times when he even says right in the video that his memory's getting kind of cloudy and he's trying to remember stuff. So that's partly why this one ends up so long. And then he started asking questions the other way too. So Dean was kind of fun. He's kind of a gruff old guy. Very, I mean, gruff is the best way to describe him, but he was a cool dude once we got him talking. So without further ado, here's our first Dean for the trip.
A little over 18 years.
Okay.
And after that, I went to Hormel, and I stayed there for 2 years, and then I went to R.R. Donnelly down there and worked there for 22 years. And plus I had a little Christmas tree farm out there. I had a little nursery. I helped a guy build steel bends, and I helped another guy trim trees. And I was usually working a first shift and a second shift, you know. And
Side gig.
I'd work 2 shifts no matter how I had to do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, or however I had to do it. I worked quite a few years there where, I don't know if you knew Lee Adrian or not, the plumber down there in Orchard.
Yeah.
I worked for him for probably 15 years. I'd get, well, I'd say probably 10 years I worked for him. It's hard to remember all them numbers. But I'd get home from Oliver at night, 3rd shift, and then get up 8 o'clock in the morning and go in to help him plumb until 3 in the afternoon when I had to be back to Oliver. So I kept busy. When I didn't have that to do, I was helping somebody else. So needless to say, when it come time to retire, I was done. And I knew just what I was going to work another half a year, but no.
When you were on layoff, or didn't they lay off much from Foundry or not?
Not as much as they did in the shop, I don't think, because I had enough seniority. When I got laid off, I could go to the shop or I could go someplace else. I had enough experience and time, so
You bumped down
yeah,
to
went down to a different, I want to say MOS, but that's
a
not
classification.
There you go. That's military MOS.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, I always had a higher classification, so I lucked out that way. Not saying I didn't get laid off, but if I could get back to work, I did.
Yeah. John Tinner was here just earlier, and he was kind of saying the same thing. If he had a chance to get back, people did want to get back.
Right.
How long did you work there?
At Oliver? I'm saying 18 years. It might be 18 and a half. I'm not sure. I just, I think that's about what it was, is 18 years. And that would have been, I don't know if it'd been 10 and 8 or 8 and 10. I worked in the shop part of the time. I worked in assembly line part-time. And when I was over there, well, then I was a material handler and expediter.
On the assembly line?
Starting out, they had the EOA line where they made the undercarriages of OC4 crawler to sell to Ingersoll Rand and that to go on their well or drilling rigs, rock drilling rigs.
Where were they made then?
That was made
What area?
down just about the same place as Allied was.
Oh, okay.
And we were right next to that north wall. And then Allied was there, and then of course the assembly line over that way. I worked there quite a bit of the time. And then I worked probably 3 years, which was my favorite job. I worked a material handler expediter for the assembly line. And just where they start the rear ends out. Me and a guy by the name of Snyder, we were responsible for all the parts that went into that rear end. It was nice. We had our own desk and everything. The only thing we had to make sure is the parts were always stocked, which was quite a job because you were always thinking 2 or 3 jobs ahead of time, you know.
And when you did a model switchover, then you had to make sure that everything was there to.
On my shortage sheet, I kept my own shortage sheet, but that included 3 models of tractors, 3 groups of tractors, one that we were on and the 2 that we were going to go to if they knew them. So that could be a little taxing sometimes because there were so many times that, you know, you may be short 3 or 4 parts on the assembly line for the job they're doing right now, but you may have 2 or 3 parts or more on the next 2 that you don't know about. Or if you do know about it, you're trying to get them. And there was a guy up in the shop. He was on purchasing. I think Kroll was his name. And I was in constant contact with him because when I had a shortage of something like on purchasing, I called him and I'd say, hey, where is these parts? Well, we'll put a tracer on that truck. And we never had very many problems because the stuff usually came in time. I remember one time when there was, I can't remember what it was, the bowl gear, what it was in the rear end. But we were coming to the end of our run and we still didn't have it. About 2 days before we were supposed to get it, I thought, oh boy, we're in trouble. We're not going to get them last tractors. And of course I told the superintendent about it, and I says, you know, there's none in service stores, because sometimes we'd rob service stores to keep the line going. And then sometimes service stores would come down and rob for me, and then I'd be in trouble. Well, anyway, this gear, I think it was the bull gear. And I kept counting, and I says, no, it's not there. We don't have it. And I went to service stores. No, we don't have any more. Well, where can we get one? called up to Minneapolis Moline, called up to Minneapolis, and you got one up there or two? Yeah, we do. Can you get it down to us? When? Tomorrow. Oh, we can't do that. So I told, I can't remember the foreman's name, I told him what the situation was. They got on the phone, got a hold of that part, took it out to the airport, flew it down to Charles City, and we got our gear in time. That was kind of unusual, but once in a while that happened when service stores would come in. You know, if somebody wants to buy a part, they're going to sell it to them. But what I should have done in that situation is told them ahead of time. I told them we were one short. And, well, in fact, I think I did that when I told them we were one short. We checked service stores. At that time, they had it, but they got rid of it in a few days. And it's pretty poor communication between me and Kroll, because we should have got one down from service stores and say, hey, that's it, boys. There is no more. But it worked out.
Yeah, there was, when I was working on the rear gear case line, there were times when the gear cases that went on the line were still pretty warm for the washer.
That's right. Yeah.
But in retrospect, you look back, that just-in-time stuff, that was going on long before what they do now is a lot of just-in-time. But some of that, like the gear cases, they didn't like to be stored outside.
No.
And if you stored a finished gear case outside, what you had to do is you had to squirt it up with this kind of real juicy Cosmoline.
Mm-hmm.
So you wash it before you get it dirty. Then you set it outside. Then you come in, back, unstrap it, put it back in through the washer again, and then put it on the line. So it's a lot of extra work.
Oh, it's a lot.
When you were having to put them outside.
And that's why I was always stressing that rather than to have a shortage or have something, it's best to possibly keep everything out of trouble. Because once you run into trouble, you could have backups and more problems. But I had like some of those 908, 134 lock washers and stuff like that. I still remember all that. And I could just walk by the bins and look at them. Okay, we need a receipts 908, 908 cap screws. But most of the workers that were on, especially on the crawler line, it was small enough so that they made sure I knew about it. Dean, you're going to need such and such in about a week. I'm running out. Okay, thank you. And I'd get that ordered right away. And sometimes things were always pretty easy, but I would say that some of the toughest stuff getting out was from the shop. If you needed some bearings or something, or something from the shop that was made, and they were having a hard time getting materials for that, make that part or something. Every day you'd go and you check that and you check that and you push this and you push that, trying to keep that number down. And by the time I'd get it down to one or two numbers, then I'd move the next clipboard over, start over again. And it sounds like a headache. It was, but once you learn the numbers by heart, and of course there's a lot of different tractor models too, but a lot of them use the same cap screws and stuff like that. So that was a gimme. But that was, purchasing parts could be trouble too. I had a relative, an uncle that worked over at receiving, and that was Leonard Steffen. And he always kind of looked out for me over there, you know. I'd be walking down the street going up to the shop, and he could step out and says, "Dean, we got that part in. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Thank you."
Scratch her off.
So that worked pretty good too. But
Yeah, there was.
everything's got to be hitting on all cylinders. And if they stop that line because they don't have a part, H breaks loose. And they're looking for a scapegoat right away.
Exactly.
And thank God I was never a scapegoat.
Well, every night they come around with, it wasn't a shortage list, but it was, where are these parts in process? You know, and we were well aware over in the shop, but it's, if they can get a casting, first you got to have it from the foundry.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Right.
And then some of those gear cases would take 25 operations to get them through the washer to the rear assembly.
Very few things were quick.
And so you had to know where you were at all times.
So that was interesting. Days flew by. And it was interesting talking to everybody and stuff like that. And working to get something done like that. Now, other times when I worked in the foundry, I worked in the core room and stuff like that. You know, that's just hard, boring work, but you get it done.
Okay, can you explain to me how the core room works? Does the sand come in the bulk and you mix it, or
there's several different ways to make a casting or put it in a flask or whatever. There's one they call green sand, and that has oil mixed with it. And that's usually just for the guys downstairs that are making the small flask for small parts. And I've even been part of that, of making some of them. And as soon as they make those, then they got them in a dryer. They fill that dryer, or drag, I'll say, full of sand, put it on a rack that goes behind them. I'll go around through the oven, and then the other core assemblers, takeoff, takes those castings out, takes those cores out when they're dry. And so you may have...
Do they coat them with anything?
Huh?
Do they coat them with anything?
Some of them got coated with graphite or, and I probably think most of them did. But power steering units and things like that, as soon as they came off of that drying rack, you took them out of the dryer, you filed off the fin, put them up on a shelf or something, on a wagon, on a little dolly. Then they would take those right up to the line, and then they'd put them on the line with a drag and a cope. You know what that means?
Well, it's half.
It's half and half.
A positive and a negative.
Right.
Half.
So there'd be the half of the drag. They put the chaplets in the bottom. Then they take the core, which is the middle, set them on top of the chaplets. And they put more chaplets on the top, so you got all the way around iron. Do you understand that?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Anyway, I've worked with all kinds of stuff. I handled cores for frames, front end frames, which were just huge,
Yeah.
you know. And their flask, like for the drags, were probably almost as wide as this room. And then there was a cope and a drag. When they'd run them to the slingers, they'd put the sand in them. And then they put the big cores down in there and put more on, what am I trying to say though? Chaplets on top of them, and then set the top core on, or the top drag on, And they had the cope and the drag, and inside was the open space with the core in it. And then alongside the flask, and inside the flask, they had a long tube that went down. It was about like this. It was, I think it was made out of wood, about like this. And then they tapered down, and that was the feeder hole. And when they started pouring that, they had to pour real slow to make sure they didn't pour too much in and break the core. So it would start to go in and pop and crackle and everything and start smoking around the outside. And then when they got done to that, well, then that flask could go down the line, and then they'd bring another one in on a hoist, spin it around, drop it down on the conveyor, put the core in it. Now this would be for any size. Put the core in, then put the cope on top. And after they put the cope and the drag together, they had C-clamps. You put C-clamps on each side, the cope and drag, and then pound them on, and they were secure then. And after that was all done and there was iron poured in the flask, that was moved down the shakeout. And shakeout would have long chains. That's where another uncle worked. They'd hook the chains on both ends of the flask, raise it up, and if they raised it up too soon, raw iron would pour out. So you had to be careful.
I was going to ask you, how long did it take for that to set up?
It didn't take too long. I would say that probably, I seen them already open it up and the iron pours out on the floor though.
That's
But usually when they open them up, it's going to be orange hot or red, yellow hot. And I don't know, we always seem to know. Well, I suppose it was probably time enough to make another flask and everything, you know. I would say probably 10 minutes at the most. Okay. Then you'd push another one down. And then after they put the flask and everything that had the core in it and the iron core and everything, they put that over on a shakeout machine. And they'd just shake the hell out of that drag that had the core in it. Well, the dirt would all crumble out, go down into a pit, and then they'd hook onto that casting, raise it up, take it over and put it on another hook and send it on down.
Okay, now, when they were going outside and going around the outside, is that when they were cooling them off then?
Yeah.
And they bring them back in and then go to the chippers or
they would go around. I didn't work that much on that side. They would move them over to the shake or the you can call them chippers. That's pretty good, but I don't know what the.
When would they hit the wheelabrator?
The wheelabrator. Right after
they came out of the
right
shakeout.
After they picked the flask up, and of course the casting would be there, and that was just a big shaker is what it was. They turn that on and shake the hell out of it, and all the dirt would fall. And then they bring it around and put it on another hook and take it up to the shakeout, or to the... See, this is part of it where my mind was starting to go. They call that... it was a room that upstairs, they were cooled down enough where people had sledgehammers and that, and they were knocking out the excess.
Yeah.
And then they would send it back down. They put them on flask and then take them outside or take them over to the mill room.
Did it make any difference how quick they cooled as far as how brittle the cast iron would be?
Well, see, I can't remember the numbers, but there was, after you did it long enough, day after day, you just automatically knew. You knew when that was ready. Mm-hmm. If somebody was going to take it apart on the squeezers or on the jig, if they were going to take it apart too early, somebody'd usually yell at them and say, wait on that, wait a while on that one. When I first started, I started in the small core room, and that was right next to the squeezers. Now you're talking about the squeezers were small parts, and then you moved over to the from the squeezers. Then the next size was the jolts. And their flasks were about yay big. And of course the slingers did wheel weights half as big as this room and things like that. The jolts, they made heads, manifolds, stuff like that. And then you went to the squeezers, they made the small molds and the small parts. Now that's just all green sand. Now if you're moving up to the, forget what we used to call it, there's a sand that I think we bought it with an adhesive in the sand. And that went through a hot box machine. And a hot box machine was, I did that quite a few times. I made a lot of the holes in the wheels. You had to have a core that went in each one of them.
Yeah.
And you'd be in like an 8-gang box. And what you do is you bring it around, you open it up, you take 8 prongs on one thing, you take it, we pick them up, unsnap them, put them in a box, then move around, put it underneath there again, hit the button, the sand would come over, poosh, into that dragon coat. When it went in there, it was resin on the sand, and it immediately gets set up. And then you already had like your spark plug holes and that was all made out of that resin sand. Toward the end there, they came across with another machine they called a cold set. And that was sand. That was also made in a different place, but that was coated too. And we made huge frames for some of the articulating tractors and that, and the rear gear cases. And you had a huge table that was just one gear case. And you put that in there and you pull the lever and the sand would come down the different places and everything. You just spread it out. And then you come around with another one, which is a cope, and that's set right on top of that one. And then you had the cope and the drag all in one. It cut out a lot of parts, and we could make a lot of them in one day.
Yeah,
I don't think you follow what I'm talking about, Eddie?
No, when we were over in I was on a rear gear case, every once in a while we'd come across the casting or two that there was a core shift in it, and we'd have trouble cleaning up a bore or two on them. And it didn't take, because you guys are doing a real good job of keeping everything
Clean
and keeping everything in line. But
But if you
once
had
in a while
core shift.
there'd be a little bit of a core shift, and we couldn't clean it up. And some of the bosses,
I got my butt chewed more than once because of that.
I didn't know that, so I'm not.
No, we wanted to know that.
Yeah.
'Cause
Well,
you couldn't keep doing that all the time. If you put your chaplets in or something, and the sand wasn't quite right or something, you put the weight down on it, chaplet may slip.
So what you're calling chaplet, is those all the little pieces you'd put in to make all the little details inside of the casting?
All they were, it depends on the size of the chaplet. Most of them were probably 1/4 inch flat on the top, maybe a 1/2 inch. Then they had a stem. And then they had the same, like a coin on the top and a coin on the bottom and a stem in between. Well, where that stem's at, that's where the iron fills in. And that part of the chaplet would melt as soon as the iron hit it. And it would give it enough time that the chaplet inside the chaplet would melt, but it would hold it up long enough to give you the inside of your part.
Yeah.
It was interesting. It really was.
Well, it's you look at a piece of cast iron, you say, "Oh, there's a piece of cast iron."
Just look at a motor block.
Yeah, exactly.
I made cores for a lot of motor blocks.
Yeah, and the head, I think, is probably more intricate
That's the same way, yeah.
than even some of these bigger castings that are simpler. In my journeys over there, I'd see after you got the heads cast, then after they were all cleaned up, then they'd reheat them, get them red hot again, and clamp them down and get them flat.
See, I never worked with that. I know what you're talking about. But
they warp when they cooled.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to heat them up to make them malleable again. And then they get them white hot, basically, and then clamp them down, and then it would be flat.
That's basically everything I know about the core room. I've done it all. But one thing that most people wonder, well, what did you do at the end of the day when some of the flasks had iron in them? Well, they dump it back into the electric or in the cupola, either cupola, and pour that back in there. And if there was any left in the my mind just went again. If there was any left in the iron pouring machine, or the thing that poured the iron,
tipper dipper.
Yeah. So then they had to make what we called a pig. You ever heard of that?
It's just a big chunk that
it's just a big flask that you hollowed out that had dirt in it, but wasn't supposed to have any. That's where they would empty their flask at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, especially like, it was either one of the, what do you want to call it? Where the cupola is, where you put the iron. Up above, to have a certain type of iron, they dump in so many bars of iron, so much lime, and everything. Then that went up above the cupola and dropped in the cupola, and that's what melted it. And so then they were able to know what kind of iron they had. Now, we didn't pour any steel, but we did have
ductile. You made some ductile stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Were you ever, they were usually weekend pours, weren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't pour them on the regular line when it was going. But that's right, that's a good point. That was and when that would pour, it just sparkle. It was pretty what.
The only reason I knew that is when I was first there, when I was in the shop, I was on a rotating, I was vacation replacement, and I was up in sheet metal, and they wanted so many things for the foundry. They put whatever metal in the bottom of that, then they put this steel cover over it, and when they poured it in, then it would.
The ductile.
Yeah, and it would effervesce, so to speak.
Right, that's what I'm talking about.
And they wanted it to get all in there in the bottom of whatever it was, and then it melted that steel, and then it mixed everything up.
Right. And most of the time, not all the time, when they were pouring, though, they would have a guy come out from, I was going to say not engineering, but come out from inspection, and they'd be carrying something that looked like a periscope, telescope. And then as they were pouring, they'd look at it, and then they could tell the right temperature or something. And I've already seen them looking at that, and it wasn't right. They shake their head, and they got to go back and put some hotter metal in it or something. But I don't really know too much about that. But the doctor steel iron, I know that for a fact. And a lot of times, even in the cupola hole, they would look and see what the iron was for temperature. It had to be just right, because you know, that iron, what it's going to go into, you don't want it too brittle. You don't want it too soft. It's got to be perfect. And they get it as perfect as they could.
Yeah, if the dual hubs, the 167 947As, that's ductile. The 167 930A, regular single hub, that's ductile. The other numbers aren't.
Huh.
See, I didn't know that. I didn't know how
I worked with it, so I
okay.
knew what was ductile and what wasn't ductile.
I wonder what the reasoning was for making those two, and the rest of them were just regular cast.
They were used on the dual basically took twice the stress, and then the 167 930 A's were on the big tractors, whereas I think it was just like the 1955s, and probably
The 17, 18, and 19 should all use the same hub, and then the 1655
that's a different size axle.
Use the smaller, and I think even the 1555, that might have been a different hub yet than the 1655. They might have been the same. I can't remember because you don't see that many 1555s.
So how do you know that? I'm the one that's getting interviewed here, but I have to ask you that question.
He is an Oliver.
I farm
freak.
with them, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got my big tractor's a 4150 that I work around with, and then I got a 1950T, a 1955. We got an 1800. We got a 1600. That's the loader tractor. We got. I'm trying to work my way down the series. We don't have any 3 digits yet. We got a Super 55 diesel, Super 77 diesel, Super 88 diesel, 66 wide front, 77 wide front, 360s, 2 5-speeds and a 4-speed, a Hart Par 70. I know I'm missing something.
Well, I rest my case. There it is, right there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm proud you got all them Olivers.
Yeah, and that's what his interest is.
That's how we got down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Well, that's a shame. All that history has been lost, and here I am, 78 years old. My time's coming to an end, and after us, who's going to remember this stuff?
Well,
That's why we're doing this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly why.
Because nobody could experience going into the foundry when it's 115 degrees in there. And
I wish there were more pictures inside, and I'm sure that there's people that got them. It's just they got a surface. But I wish there was pictures and video inside that
I
building.
don't think there is that many pictures. I really don't. I don't remember ever seeing anybody take pictures, except the corporation themselves, and any documentation they've got on some of that stuff. They hide it, and I don't know why. They must think somebody's going to make money off of it or something.
Well, and Floyd County Museum's got a lot of stuff too, but they don't. They've probably only been through a quarter of it.
Yeah.
Which, since you were in purchasing, I just found out today. Do you go down there very often? Down to the Floyd County Museum?
Not that very often, no.
You need to go down there and talk to McKenna. She's the director. Since you worked in purchasing, they have a bunch. She just showed me today. They have 2 entire bookshelves full of ledgers, starting from Hart Par all the way up till almost the end. Purchasing ledgers. They don't know what they know what they are, but they don't know how to decipher the information. And she flipped one open today and showed it to me, and I think it's something that you could help them decipher. The one she showed me, we just flipped open one page and looked at it, and it was a list inside of a White Farm binder. It had part numbers, the part that those numbers specified. There was a piece of the page cut off that they don't know, and then at the bottom it said model 2105, A model, and then like a job number or something. So you need to go talk to her if you get time and tell her I sent you down there. Tell her about the purchasing ledgers and that you might be able to. I mean, obviously, you're not going to be able to help her on the hard part stuff. You ain't that old.
Mm-hmm.
But those white farm ledgers, you might be able to help her out and decide, or at least tell her how they were used and what the numbers mean, and kind of help them.
But you know, I think looking back on that, I don't know why, but it always seemed to me like that was always pretty secretive.
As far as
Some of
photographing
them
stuff?
books, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, and that's what they've run into. They have loads and loads and loads of
Because I've talked
documents.
to different people and says, whatever happened to all them books? Somebody said they thought they burned most of them.
Yeah, there's a bunch of that stuff down there. They got the entire basement, which is a room probably dang near as big as this house, is full.
Books.
Books. They have an entire rack. They have 2 full racks of full-size blueprints. I don't know if you probably remember seeing. Well, no, we talked about this last night. The flat storage drawers. They have 2 or 3 of those full of blueprints. They have an entire filing cabinet, or no, 2 filing cabinets, 4 drawers, full front to back of microfiche.
Oh man, that's worth something.
They got the microfiche reader too. They're working on digitizing all that. They're working on digitizing all the blueprints. They have, she showed me today they have a blueprint cabinet full of blueprints going all the way back to Hartpar. The one that I pulled out was dated 1913.
Mm.
They have quality reports. They have defect reports on all of the Fiat tractors. I didn't know that was a thing. They have defect reports for all 585 Moline engines. Didn't know that was a thing. They have shipping invoices for complete tractors that they don't know. Like if they have 25% of it cataloged and know what they got, I'd be impressed, because he said they don't have the man hours, or they don't get they really need volunteers to help go through it. But the big thing is they need volunteers that have seen that stuff, so that when they pull it out of a door, they can say, "Oh yeah, this is what this is. This is how we used it." And that's the hard time there. That's the thing they have a hard time with is, I don't think that the word gets out nearly as much that they need volunteers. And then obviously, you guys' age are getting up there, and the people that remember all that stuff are getting fewer and further between. So that's why I think you need, if you get time, if you could at least take an afternoon and go down there and talk to McKenna about those ledgers,
Would be that sometime.
And if they took you down in the basement, some of the archives, you might even recognize some of the stuff they got down there too. I mean, it's pretty mind blowing.
Purchase parts or what? Anything that's purchased.
All I know, like I told you, it's an entire binder. I don't know how many models are in that, but she had, like, those white farm binders were on a shelf like this wide, and it was all white farm binders. So I don't know if one binder equals one model tractor, or if they have multiple, but it was a sheet of paper with multiple lines on it, and the first line was part number, then the second line was what that part number went to, so like nuts, bolts, adhesive, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
And then it said model 2105. I don't understand the A model, because I didn't think that they had multiple. I know they had different series of 105, but I never heard one referred to as an A model 105, and maybe that's how they referred to them in the books. But it sounds like something that you would have used for picking parts for a job, is kind of what I'm thinking.
I don't remember ever using them books like that, but I had the little magazine books that sat on my desk I could get the part numbers out of. But, see, I really didn't need to do that, because the parts were established and the numbers were established. And once I knew that and recognized that part of whatever number it might be, I just automatically knew that was what I had to order or whatever. If I did have something that gave me trouble, I called up the office and they would give me the number or whatever, give me a reference number. But
So maybe those things were up in the office, and that's what they used for
I
reference
think so, because
material.
we didn't use them down on the line.
And they were awful clean, so they didn't seem like something that'd be down in the dirt and the
That
dust and the
answers your
grease.
question right there.
Yeah.
So
Dirt and the dust.
Dirt
Nothing
and
like
dust.
having an assembly line right next to where all the cast iron is machined, and you got cast iron in the air.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first day I went into the foundry, Ed Kroll, remember Ed Kroll?
Now, name's familiar, but I don't remember him.
He's the one that hired me. And he says, does it bother you to work in the foundry? I said, Ed, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm going to want to find out. I got a feeling. Oh, he took me down to the foundry, and I walked in there, and it was a cloudy, rainy day. And the smoke just hangs in there. And I walked in, I was in the smoke core room. He said, you're going to be starting out in this core room, taking these dried cores off of this rack and putting them in other racks to take to the molders. Well, anyway, I looked around, and there was Wayne Lubbock from, from Floyd. I don't know if you knew him or not. He was over in the squeezers. And Wayne was probably from near that tree from being out there, that big tree. Once in a while I could see him. It was that smoky in there that day. And I thought, oh my God, what am I getting into? Well, I lasted out and eventually got used to it, but the smoke and that wasn't good. So whenever I go to the doctor and the doctor asks me, have you ever smoked? I says, no, but I worked in the foundry for 8 years. Oh, okay, you smoked then.
Yeah.
So anyway, that answers that question. But as time wore on in the foundry, they got more efficient with their air quality. And they put that above the cupola, they put that great big stack, that new stack, and that cleaned the air up a lot. But before that, it was unbelievable how bad it was in there. But I didn't let it bother me. I just figured I had to work, and that was my job right now. And it was kind of comical because one day there was a young guy that came in there, and they brought him up there, and they asked me to help train him in a small core room. Well, that was probably from here to that, maybe not even that far from the house over there. And there's a lot of action, a lot of iron being poured. And we were sitting there towards the end of the day when the shift was over. They're going to drop the bottom, what they call dropping the bottom. Have you ever heard that?
No.
Well, the bottom of the cupola had 2 big gate doors. And after they lined the cupola with the stuff, with a putty on that for the next day's run, they got that all in there. Then they pushed those 2 great big doors up and run a pin through them, a big pin through them, and then let it go. And then that was holding up the doors. Well, at the end of the day, in order to clean that out, they had a little forklift back there with a chain on it that would hook onto that pin. And before it got time to drop the cupola and get rid of the excess iron, they beat the horn about 3 times. And it made a lot of noise, and everybody cleared out of the way and everything. And they did that, and I didn't tell that kid anything. He says, what's that? I says, they're going to drop the cupola. They're going to what? I says, come over here, stand closer. Anyway, they opened the doors swung open like that. All of a sudden, the cupola dropped, and sparks and fire went all over, like a huge fireworks going off. And he jumped, and he looked at me, and he says, how often do they do that? I said, they do that every day. He didn't come back the next day. That scared him.
Now, when they opened the door, what was left over in the?
Yeah, it was coke and leftover iron. That was still
okay.
Everything they dumped into the
top.
from the top. It didn't get it all used up and get all that coke in that. What that does is it gets that hot. It just, as the molten iron just weaves its way through. So that you have about that far at the bottom, that's just iron and coke and slag,
yeah,
stuff like that. And anyway, just before that happens, the guys come out. They've got a pipe, gas pipe, and a rod. They got two different things they use, and they run that up that snout and try to clean that bottom out as much as they can. There's a lot of pounding like this and get as much iron to pour out as they can. Whatever's left has to come down when you open the bottom. And if you'd never seen it before, it would scare the hell out of you because it sounds like the whole place lit up. But anyway, I always got a kick out of that. And we get a new guy in and didn't tell him about it. We'd be doing, all of a sudden you hear the dates go, and boom, the sparks would fly.
Yeah. If you weren't expecting it.
I did. I was expecting it.
It would be quite a deal.
So that's a lot of what I know. As far as any specifics on, I know what you're looking for, and they probably got something like that down there, and just nobody can explain it. And that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, there's piles and piles and drawers and boxes and photo negatives and film strips and
I wonder if
binders
that'd been an experimental. Probably was experimental.
That was my other thought.
Because up there by Division 8, that was called experimental. And we weren't allowed to go in there. Nobody was allowed to go in there. And they had to have something in there that we weren't supposed to see. And the guys
that was in the Foundry you're talking about?
No. That's out in the shop. That was up by Division 8, up by welding.
Oh, okay.
It was just west of welding. And that was experimental. It was just west of welding and just east of a couple washers up in there next to the
heat treat would have been right up
there.
There
You go.
too.
The heat treat and then the washers and then on the next building beyond that, that would have been experimental. If you can picture that in your mind.
It's been 50 years since
I
I
know.
walked the halls.
But I can't believe it now that I'm talking so much of this stuff. It's 10 years from now, I probably won't know it all. But experimental was right next door. And there was a lot of parts. You know what the bean field is, don't you? It's where they stored the tractors.
Yeah, up on Cleveland Avenue.
Right. Well, up there too, they had a lot of pallets and a lot of parts outside that were experimental. And there was stuff up there. I've walked up there a few times looking at stuff and wasn't supposed to be up there, but I walked up there anyway. And I identified parts that didn't go along with any of our tractors we were selling. But now since my brother-in-law, Dennis, has collected 1045 and all those Hart Pars, a lot of them parts are from the Hart Par. And they just stored them up there in the storage. But some of them parts that were secretive in that, they kept them up there too. And when they came out with I'm trying to think what they call it, over and under, on the tractors. Oliver was first and all that stuff. And we tried to keep as secret as they could. I really believe Oliver was the best tractor ever made. Not just because I worked there, but there were some days I'd say it was the worst tractor they ever made.
Well, but you never worked at John Deere. Well, I mean, I can't say that.
I've got two cousins that work there.
And it's probably the same way there, If you work someplace, sometimes you see things you don't want to see.
Right.
But that's the way it is. And whether it's green, red, blue,
That's right.
or purple.
Everybody's got their winners and everybody's got their lemons.
Yeah, but I think Oliver, if I remember right, every tractor that was made, I think they pulled it off the line and put it on a PTO, check the PTO horsepower.
Yeah, the 50 series. I don't know that.
I know it started. I think it started at the 50 series because I thought they were having discrepancies with the 1800s. I think
They could.
is why they started certified PTO horsepower program. If I remember right, that rolled out with the 50 series.
Okay.
If I recall correctly.
Well, your recollection is good enough for me.
I don't know that they ran every like 55 on a dyno. I think
The 55s, they didn't get the certified sticker on them anymore.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So, I don't recall. But I know every 50 series has the sticker. Not all of them I've seen have the signature signing off on them. But they all got the sticker.
I got a 25 horse Massey Ferguson right now, brand new one. And that don't have a PTO on the back. Or in the front. I mean, it's got it on the back, but I was looking for one that had it on the front so I could put a snowblower on the front too. Well, I've called them up since, and I says, you want to come and get that rear snowblower? No, why? They says, you try blowing snow for an hour with your neck cranked around. And they said, well, we'll see what you can do. And I says, I know about what you're going to do. You're going to offer me a brand new one with a PTO in front and a cab. Now you're talking, they said. But my father-in-law had a lot of John Deere, a lot of Olivers. And they had an 88, Super 88. They had a 1600. 1850, what else? An 88 and a 77 and a 66, maybe two 66s. They've had a lot of Oliver tractors. See, I can't even get that terrible name out of my mouth. Yeah. And one guy says, well, why did you buy a Massey Ferguson? They're not green. I says, that's the closest thing you can buy to green right now. You know,
That's about right. There you go.
Didn't like the idea, but that's what I got. The price was right. But if I want an Oliver, I would go up to my father-in-law's, but they're having a sale this weekend. They're selling all their equipment. And that's Totterville's, mile east, and or 2 weeks from now the sale is. It's a mile east of Totterville and a mile north from over the railroad tracks. Merle Hoffman's farm.
Okay.
He sold some hard pars. We got everything running. We got like a Silver King, and anyway, he's got fun tractors to drive. That's all I'd ever do with them, but before I got this Massey Ferguson, I had a little Alice Chalmers that he had, and them won't make good little utility tractors. You know, they're nothing good for anything more, but yeah, a lot of times when I was working on the assembly line, and if they needed to shift some people around, I always made sure I wanted to go down at the end of the assembly line and drive them out in the field. And I don't know why, because they say they were terrible gas drinkers as the 1750s. I don't know if that's true or not, but boy, that's 1600, 1650, 17, I just love those tractors for that size. They were nice tractors, and I still like that sound. Nothing can even come close to it.
Best 6-cylinder power on the market.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Now the 1850 gas, I have it on good authority because I know a guy whose granddad bought one new. That's the one you want to avoid because that one's the pig.
Yeah. Well, there was one of them I heard just drinks gas like an alcoholic.
That'd probably be the 1850.
All right.
And it's weird because they went from the 1800, which literally broke gasoline fuel economy records at Nebraska. And then the very next one to replace it, the 1850, went completely the other way. You better have a fuel truck.
What do you think they gained by doing that? Another unknown.
What was the difference? Do you know? In the engine? What was?
I can't even remember what engine it was now.
The 1800, I can't remember if that started out with the 310 gas. I think it did start out with the 310 gas.
Would that have been a Perkins or?
Well, the 1850 diesel was a Perkins.
Okay.
The 1850 gas was still a 310 gas, but I mean the carburetor on that thing was like the size of a saw. It was a monster. And Jake Ziegler, I don't know if you ever watched any of his stuff while they're down in Illinois. He's the guy that I got that grain table and stuff off of.
Okay.
For some reason, Jake's granddad had it in his mind that gasoline was the way to go, and he never wanted a diesel tractor on the farm. And I think they'd had an 1800 gas. Matter of fact, I think they still got it. But they needed a bigger horse, so they bought that 1850 gas. Mm-hmm. And they were used to running that 1800. I mean, it's still a gas, so it didn't sip fuel like a diesel would, but I mean, it was fairly economical. And he said they bought that 1850. They could plow twice as long with that 1800 as they could with that 1850. He said you'd get about 2.5, 3 hours out of a tank of fuel pulling 5 bottoms with that 1850.
Are you talking about a fender tank or?
Nah, that one didn't have fender tanks. That was just the underhood tank.
Okay.
And then that was their big horse for forever. And then their next big purchase, they bought a 2150. And when they bought that, his granddad was all pissed off because he couldn't buy gas. So he said the first diesel on their farm was a 2150, and the only reason that they got it was because they couldn't buy any gas. It was only diesel.
Well, what was a 2150T? Was that was?
Yeah, 2050 was the Herc, and the 2150 was the turbocharged.
Turbocharged, yeah.
Herc.
Yeah, was that articulating or?
No.
No, the 2655 or A4T 1600, those were the first articulated, and then in 74 White came out with the 4150, and that was the first Charles City four-wheel drive.
And there was a 950T?
1950T.
1950.
And I got one of those.
Now, I'm not sure if that's the one or not, but they made a whole bunch of them, and I think the tappets or something was bad in them. And I worked like for 4 weekends in a row just changing tappets, and we did that up in Division 8. And every one of them tractors had to be tore down and had to be refurnished.
Were you there when they first brought out the 2150s? They switched from the 1355 and they put the silver and black color scheme.
Mm-hmm.
Were you there when they first came out with those?
Yeah.
Were you in on the weekend?
Maybe that's what I'm thinking about.
The weekend redo of all the sheet metal, because
we did something with the motor too.
No, but anyway, we had in the weekends we had every aisle down in cast iron machining filled up with these tractors.
So there was 4150s that were built as 1355s and then resheet metal?
No, there was two 1350s. There was, when they quit making the 1355, they changed the sheet metal
to the 2150.
To the 2150. And there was something wrong with the way everything fit after it came off the assembly line. And there was probably 100 tractors that needed all new sheet metal. So they put them out in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
And then they made all new sheet metal for them, painted all that sheet metal.
See, I don't remember that. I wasn't in on that one.
And
maybe I wasn't there then, because you say 1350?
1355, when that was...
I don't even... Was that the latest tractor they made?
No, this was back in 70...
That should have been 76.
You know, I don't even remember ever seeing a 1350.
5.
I just don't remember it.
They made them yellow and they made them green.
Yeah, they made the Oliver G1355 and the Moline G1355. Because I think the only two Molines.
I tried to remember and I just forgot. I can always fall back on that.
I think the only two Molines that were built. I think the only two grown Molines that were built in Charles City were the G1355 and the G955.
Did 955s too.
You want to watch?
They didn't make very many of them.
You want water?
Thank you.
Yeah, they didn't make very many of them.
Mm-mm.
See
So
that?
if you can get your hands on a 955,
I've never seen one, I don't think.
yeah, and it was a smaller engine.
Got it.
Those things, they used to make the caps longer.
All in the name of less plastic.
Yeah,
Oh, look at that thing. I'll get it. Try to
yeah.
crack it.
They had a smaller
45.
engine, like,
The 955s had the 504, and then the
Yeah.
G1355s had the 585.
right. So
Which
put
they were the same block, they were just a shorter stroke, if I remember right.
4 cylinders?
They were both sixes.
Yeah. What they did is they grafted the Minneapolis Moline front end onto the rear end of it would have been
The 1355 would have been a 2255 rear end.
yeah, and the 955
Was
would
a
have
19. I think they might have been an 1855 rear end. I think they had the lighter axles in them
Okay.
because they were only 95 horse.
Yeah.
Didn't have that a turbo on it, didn't it?
No.
You could, I think they offered their high altitude kit for the 1355. I think the same high altitude kit they offered for the 2655 that killed so many motors.
Yeah.
And then by the time the 2150 came out, that's when they added the external oil pump and they were actually built to be turbocharged. But
Yeah, going
But they
back
weren't.
to that. Yes.
Which
20
one? The 1950T, I remember that.
yeah,
I remember those tractors, the 1950T. And was there anything bigger than that with a T?
because you had the only reason the T came about, you had your 1950, which was the 453 Detroit.
Yeah.
And then in 67, they came out with the 1950T because they wanted a Waukesha in it because the Waukesha was cheaper than buying the Detroit.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to make the chorus and handle the chorus for the Waukesha.
And if they could have kept their quality control up on the 1855 and 1955 like they had on the 1950T, because you didn't see nearly as many T's blown up as you did 1955s and 1855s. If they could have kept the quality control that they had 67, 68, 69, not saying they wouldn't have had all the 1855s blowing up, but they probably wouldn't have had as many.
That's what we were doing when we were changing them parts. 1950, 20 or 50, 1950 I think we're blowing up, so blowing a turbocharger right off it. That's what it was, now I remember.
Yeah, those.
Anyway, you talk about air quality. You get all these tractors sitting there and those engines that weren't broken in, diesels,
Yeah.
and some of them were running, inside the building, in that assembly area.
That's not
There's
good.
no exhaust fans. And you couldn't see 35 feet. Your eyes burned, and they hired anybody that knew what a wrench was, and could point part A onto part B.
Yeah.
And on the weekends to come in there to get these tractors out the door.
See, I was volunteering I was volunteering every weekend for that. I was working 7 days a week, and I don't know how many weeks we worked like that. But got to the point I didn't even know which month it was.
Were you down there when everybody was wanting ring and pinion gears? They couldn't make them fast enough.
Yep, I remember that.
We were air freighting them from wherever out your direction, out Michigan or Ohio or something. And
Cleveland, wasn't it?
no, it could have been.
I remember that too.
Because they were coming in 10 in a box, air freighted about every 4 hours. just to keep the line running.
Just to keep the line. They would do anything they could to keep that line. I forget what they said. I knew one time what they said for every minute the line was down. It was 1,000 or 2,000. I don't remember.
It's just like turning the money off.
Yeah.
So
the bills were still packing up behind.
Yeah.
So did they not machine the or did they not forge and machine the ring and pinions here?
No.
So
They was purchased product.
So
they're all matched sets.
So like my 1955 has a chipped 1.5 chipped teeth on the ring gear, and it was a heat treat flox. You can see where there was a hot spot right at the brake. So if there was a heat treat issue and something like that, that was an Oliver's thing. That was a wherever they came from.
That was a vendor. Yeah.
Huh.
And during that fiasco, a shipment came in late one evening and got parked over by shipping and receiving, and it had a bunch of cardboard and stuff thrown on it. And
rained that night.
No, it didn't rain that night. When they were cleaning up the area, when that pallet got scooped up, got put in the dumpster.
Oh, no.
So you should have seen everybody trying to find out where that pallet load
Probably
of
up
ring
on
and
the hill.
pinion gear. It was at the landfill.
Yeah. That's where they would
They
have
had
taken it.
about 10 people out there scouring that, and they found them. Because that was either the line ran or the line didn't run.
So what did they do? They found them, and brought them down to the washer and cleaned them up? Or?
Probably. Hung them on and run around and yeah.
Boy, I bet somebody caught holy heck for that.
Well,
Maybe not.
it's one of those things, you know.
That's
It's
one of
okay,
the things I'm talking about.
Clean up at night, you know, get things in order. Boom. Yeah. And then if you look at some of the build sheets, there's cutoffs on numbers on different bearings.
Mm-hmm.
You probably had to keep track of if there was a change in bearing,
Yeah.
where the serial number.
You got
Dropped.
to match. You got to match the bearings up.
Yeah.
For the
Well, when
Is that what
everybody,
you're talking about? or-
yeah, when everybody was running out of bearings, cups and cones. Were you in on the deal where they got a whole bunch of World War II surplus bearings that were close?
Ah,
Close.
that's not
So
close
we
enough.
we had to go bring the gear cases back and either bore these bores just a little bit bigger to take that bearing, and then they had to go back. So where some of those serial number cutoffs, there's different size bearings.
So you're talking the ID or the OD on them bearings?
The OD
Ooh,
in the gear case.
yeah.
And they had guys from I don't know I don't know who ended up getting charged for their time, but they had to take them out of these
They were probably wax
packet, you know,
Mm.
tubes. I'll
Yeah.
call them tubes
right.
that were wrapped in cosmoline, and the bearings were wrapped or had cosmoline in them. They had to soak that stuff off and clean them up at night, and then put them down in your area so they're ready to go in the morning. It's just some of the stuff.
Title in that. She's the better half.
Well, that's what works at my house. Better have.
It's worked for years and years.
Yeah, it's
hasn't it?
worked over 50 years now. Almost 60.
Oh,
Foundry.
yeah.
Literally everybody. There is so much pride in the Foundry at that plant. The crowning achievement of that plant is that Foundry.
Yeah.
Everybody you talk to.
Well, the Foundry didn't have quite as many ups and downs
No, that's right.
as what the shop and the line did. And there was a lot of things, like you said, pieces that went to deer
Yeah.
that nobody knew about, and all the other different places that bought the product.
I don't know how many hundreds of wheel weights, big wheel weights we made for them. Put them on a pallet and ship them down.
I was told, and I don't know how true it is, that you could. Because did you guys coat the castings before you sent them down, or did you send them raw?
You know, I don't remember that, but
And the reason I ask is what I was told is that the easiest way to tell a John Deere casting that came out of Charles City was John Deere used kind of a yellow coating inside of their castings, and Oliver had kind of that greenish tint to it, and that was the easiest way to tell if it was if it was a Charles City casting was by the coating inside the casting.
could be very well. I didn't hear that, but that makes sense.
Yeah,
I would say that's probably right.
yeah. I don't know a green. If you look inside your 1955, it's more of a brown color to it, and I think, like you said, deer would be lighter color.
That was what I heard. But there's just like everything else when it comes
Well, you
down.
got to do something with them castings because they rust just right now.
Yeah, because all the raw castings that we got from the Foundry were stacked up outside along the west side before they got moved in for either gear case or front frames. They were always coated with that, whatever it was.
Yeah.
It's got a special name for it, and I can't
Glycol?
remember. Yeah, gly something.
Yeah. But yeah, like you said, everything gets rusty in a second and a half.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that you guys cast Hemi manifolds there too.
Did what?
Hemi manifolds for Chrysler.
Oh, yeah.
I found that out yesterday.
And we made, in the Foundry for quite a while there, I was making, can't think of the guy's name now, from Rockford. We were assembling cores, making blocks for mercury manifolds. Making mercury manifold. And Mercury bought, I don't know how many hundreds of them from us.
Mercury.
Outboard motors.
Oh. Cast iron or aluminum?
Yeah.
Cast iron.
Yeah.
Huh.
Manifold was about yay big, and I think we had to do me and Lefty, I think we worked on that when we had to do 50 or 60 a day for 2 or 3 years. And then one day Lon Chambers walked over and he says, "Dean, I got a job for you, but you don't have to take it. but if you agree to it, it's yours. He says, I want them to get some mercury motor blocks made. It was a different looking thing. It was small, but anyway, I had to make 4 of those a day. I got all the cores from the core room and all the chaplets I needed, and I got 4 different blocks, bases to build them in. And if I could do that in 8 hours, he'd pay me 12. And God, I did that for probably 6-8 months, the best job I ever had. And I got good at doing it, you know. And the only time I had to slow up was once I had a bad one. No, they didn't like that. And they were built so that they were made. The reason what happened there is when I put in a chaplet, must have broke part of the core off, left a hole in the casting. I never did that again because they took me over to the mill and showed me what happened. And I said, yes, I did. It's my fault.
That's, well, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff for Viking pump and.
I mean, you could sit there forever and every once in a while think of something new. And
I think they told me something like 80% of that foundry capacity was for outside sources, and the other 20%, that was what Oliver was using.
Yeah.
Between Oliver and Waukesha.
And it's crazy because that foundry wasn't, it was a decent sized foundry, but it wasn't huge by any means.
No.
So the kind of capacity they turned out of that thing was nuts.
Well, it was amazing because you were pouring iron for the slingers, which is big castings like the frames and everything, and then you were turning out iron for the small, like I don't know I can't think right now it'd be a small casting, and you were turning out iron for them. Then you were turning out iron for the slingers. The slingers. So the slingers, see, my mind is going again. Now you know what you got to look forward to. I'm trying to think. The squeezers, that's the small boxes. And then you got the jolts, what are the big boxes for heads and stuff like that. But that was fast. That iron was being poured as fast as 3 ladlemen could carry it. They'd fill what they had to fill, turn around, head back, another one would come in. They all had a thing they had to do, and I don't remember any of them ever shutting down. They were pouring iron as fast as they could go.
How many hours a day? 8?
8. And I don't think we poured iron at night, but during the daytime, they were moving right along. And so if you were carrying cores or something to go in those flasks to the slingers or something, you had to keep moving. That core carriers weren't even getting any time off.
So when they load the cupola with the coke and the
lime
and what,
iron,
pig iron, scrap or pig iron,
and scraps.
Okay. And then they inject air in it?
Yeah,
air
would be injected in it, and well, you can imagine how hot that gets. It had to get over 2,800 degrees, I know that. But then we had what they call the electric furnace too, and that had 3 electrodes, like welders, 6, and they were at the top of that thing, and they'd keep bouncing up and down on the iron. And every time it come down, and melt a little more, like that. They had these hooked together up on top. It was just like bringing an arc welder down or a welder down, and that's how they heated that.
The arc heated the iron.
Yeah.
Then I'm guessing you had to change the electrodes every so often.
Oh yeah, they look like big carbon cylinders about yay tall. And but they'd last quite a while. I would say they probably lasted, I never counted one, but I'd say a week or better. And that was the
Was
electric
that
oven.
used for special pours, or was it used all the time? in
Well, they
conjunction with
were-
the other one.
I think they've used that on just about everything, but most of them pours there, I think they handled most of the bigger stuff. Now, I may be wrong on that. Somebody could disagree with me, but I'm just telling you stuff how I remember it.
Yeah, that's all we can do.
Yeah. And not everybody sees everything the same way, but they're pouring iron, and I knew that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you were able to impart
Well, I was
some
glad
of
to
your
come over.
wisdom. Some of your wisdom.
Well, it's fun. I learned something too.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Because I'm sure Ethan did.
I'll
and
take
I
this
did.
water home with me. I'm gonna drink it on the way home.